I'm going to do a reading from Flower and Garden magazine, August 1972. And this is called A Visit to the White House Gardens by Ed Hume. It was a cloudy, warm, and humid day in September as we stepped onto the lawn of the President's Garden at the White House in Washington, D.C., where history has so many times been recorded. The welcoming of astronauts, the greeting of world dignitaries, announcements of cabinet appointments by President Nixon, the wedding of Tricia Nixon are only a few of the most recent events in this most publicized garden in the United States. In the President's Garden, we were standing on a beautiful green carpet of zoysia grass. Mr. Irvin Williams, chief horticulturalist of the National Park Service, explained that the lawn is completely replaced each fall with the sod of Marian bluegrass. The job is done in one day, at a time when the president is away from the White House. The reason for the change is that the lush green zoysia turns brown during the winter, whereas the Marian bluegrass will stay deep green throughout this cold, harsh season. In company with Mr. Edward Nixon, the president's brother, and my host as the arranger of this tour, we proceeded for 2.5 hours to explore the many facets of White House horticulture as described by Mr. Williams. I learned that the program of lawn care includes fertilizing 4 times a year, the last feeding in September or October. Mowing is done twice a week, a rate that makes the job easier because of fewer clippings each time and more satisfactory because only the green blades of the grass are cut, so there is no yellowing effect. The mowers are sharpened monthly. Yes, the White House does have lawn moths, lawn diseases, and even toadstools to contend with. Carefully arranged in the garden to complement the lawn are neatly sheared boxwood hedges, bright gray-leaved dusty miller, a favorite for winter color, roses, crabapples, and many other colorful plants. Mr. Nixon pointed out the huge evergreen magnolias planted by Andrew Jackson. They are almost as high as the White House roof. In a closer view, Mr. Williams showed us how they are braced, tied, and otherwise supported to protect them from the wind the president's helicopter creates as it lands on the south lawn. In news from the White House, reference is often made to the Rose Garden. Actually, this is the same as the President's Garden. In 1962, during President Kennedy's administration, Mrs. Paul Mellon was commissioned to redesign the Rose Garden to make space available to receive public groups. As a result, many of the rose bushes were replaced with flowering crabapples, 5 in each bed. The president's office overlooks this garden from the west wing of the building, and the south portico borders it on the east side. The garden changes with each new season. In the spring, an 18-inch border of grape hyacinth lines the flower beds. Then behind and between the boxwood hedging, masses of tulips bloom. Pictures and postcards reveal the beauty of the gardens during that season. Annuals and perennials provide the color during the summer. Summer flowers are replaced each fall with blooming chrysanthemums. This changeover takes place in September, and after the first frost, the autumn leaf color of the surrounding trees and shrubs enhances the overall effect. Osmanthus, magnolias, holly, boxwood, and crab apples, heavily laden with fruit, are also outstanding in September. The dusty Miller edgings with bright gray foliage add light and life to the garden at all times of the year, but especially during the cloudy, dark fall and winter months. As we passed around the south portico of the White House, I asked about the containers of chrysanthemums in full bloom on the upper balcony. This is another of the many areas Mr. Williams and his staff are responsible for. He told us this is a favorite place for the Nixons to dine in good weather, and if you turn and look across the lawns, trees and fountains with the Washington Monument in the distance, you can easily understand why. Large magnolia grandifloras stand on each side of the south entrance to the White House. The First Lady's garden is a short distance away. It is sometimes referred to as the Jacqueline Kennedy Garden or the East Garden. You can see part of it as you enter the White House for the regular morning tour conducted for visitors. Carefree geraniums started from seed, and many other annuals are in full bloom. Dusty Miller is used here also. The boxwood borders the flower beds. Instead of being sheared in the usual square style, it is left irregular and informal, very pleasing to the eye. The same lush green zoysia grass has been used here, and it too is replaced with bluegrass each year before winter arrives. Some of the evergreens in the beds along the sides of the gardens are artistically sheared and shaped in formal topiary manner. They appear to be American hollies. Our attention was drawn to a row of lindens, which must be replaced in about 5 years because they will have outgrown their location. Several other types of holly, more magnolias, and crabapple trees are also growing in this garden. Mr. Nixon noticed a large citrus tree at the far end of the garden, and as we walked toward it, Mr. Williams identified it as the hardy orange Poncirus trifoliata, which survives Washington's cold winters very well. Our next question was, is it edible? It is, Mr. Williams said, but it is rather sour and poor. The tree, about 10 feet tall, had well over 100 small bright orange and green fruits. The First Lady's garden dates to the time of Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt, with changes made in 1913 and again in 1952. Like the President's garden, it is now both functional and decorative. Plants used and color combinations are changed with each season. The Nixons enjoy the gardens and show interest in them. In fact, Mr. Williams commented, if something was wrong in the garden, I'm sure the word would get to me. Mr. Nixon noted that Mrs. Richard Nixon's garden at San Clemente, California, really shows her love of flowers. The bright cut flower arrangements inside the White House also reflect this interest. I was impressed with the lack of insect and slug damage. Mr. Williams said even the White House garden has slugs to fight, as well as many types of insects. The gardeners are obviously successful in this endeavor. Close to 19 acres of White House grounds are maintained by a staff of only 6 people. These 6 gardeners care for approximately 600 trees, 5,000 shrubs, and between 45,000 and 50,000 annuals, perennials, and bulbs. They grow most of them in their own greenhouses. In addition, there is forcing of bulbs and caring for the green foliage plants within the residence, mowing the lawns, pruning and replacement of trees, shrubs, and annuals. When the job becomes too big, although this seldom occurs, Additional men are brought in from the National Park Service. Outstanding features of the south grounds are the large mounds, one on each side of the area. These were designed by Thomas Jefferson in about 1809 to afford privacy and screen the roads on both sides of the circular drive. On one mound is a beautiful American elm planted by John Quincy Adams in about 1826 or 1827. A pool with fountains is the focal point on the lower south lawn. Recently, it was decided to run the fountains 24 hours a day, every day of the year. Hundreds of pink geraniums circle the pool when I was there. Next to the fountains is a large Japanese lace-leaf maple planted about 85 years ago by President Grover Cleveland. Nearby are the black walnut and the pin oak planted by President Eisenhower during his terms of office. To the south from this point is a perfect view of the Washington Monument in the distance. Turning completely around, you see the majestic White House on the rich green lawn, bordered by the presidential trees on both sides. Trees or shrubs have been planted by Jackson, Harrison, Wilson, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, Johnson, and President Nixon. Tree planting has become a tradition in recent administrations. Mr. Williams pointed out a tree about 3 feet tall near the edge of the south lawn. It is a western sequoia, commonly called redwood, planted by Richard Nixon. The tree has had difficulty becoming established. New healthy shoots have emerged, however, and the future seems bright for it. The tree was mulched heavily to protect it over the winter. As we made our way from the South Gardens through the White House to the north entry on Pennsylvania Avenue, I asked whether the National Park Service also maintains the President's Gardens in California and Florida. Mr. Williams replied that since they are the President's personal residences, they are not a part of his responsibility. They are maintained by the Nixons. In front of the White House is a beautiful single fountain circled with geraniums. The boxwood hedge that President Truman planted can be seen from this point. As you look back from Pennsylvania Avenue side, the building seems majestic in its green setting. One has to be there really to appreciate the beauty and respect it inspires. Grounds of the White House, we observed, are a good example of how plants improve an urban environment. Each magnificent tree filters pollution from the air and releases oxygen, reduces surrounding noise and confusion, screens out distracting sights, serves as a windbreak, collects litter, and, of course, adds its beauty to the scene. Landscaping of the White House all started back when Thomas Jefferson designed the mounds. Today, over 160 years later, it is still in progress.